Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn webinar, Where'd the Money Go? A Field-Wide Survey. We want to invite those of you who are on Twitter to follow along and join in the conversation by tweeting to @JTFN or using the hashtag #TeenPhilanthropy, and we'll put a little reminder about that in the chat. So we hope that you will join us in commenting on our discussion today, both on Twitter and on the line. I also want to welcome again everyone who just joined us. We have a nice group on the line today, but also a good size to be able to have some conversation. So I will be sure to give lots of opportunities for that to talk about the results that we are sharing. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat. Note that only we'll see them as the presenters, but we'll give you opportunities to share them with other folks. So hopefully many of you saw the report that we put out last month about the 2013-2014 survey of teen foundations, and I know that a whole bunch of folks on the line, programs participated in that study as well. So thank you again for sharing the data with us. Our results are only as good as all of those who share with us. So today we're going to contextualize those results a bit. We're going to share some additional data, and we're also going to have some opportunities to share our reflections and reactions together. We're going to look at who the teens are, how much they're giving, which issues are most important to them, the national trends, and which organizations received grants during this 2013-2014 program year. Some of this data we've actually been collecting at JTFN since the 2008-2009 school year, but we've asked a bunch of new questions this year, pieces of data that we hadn't gathered in the past, so it'll be interesting to look at those for the first time together. While this report is focused on the money, as it is named, I would be remiss in not beginning with a reminder, although all of you involved in this work know it so well, that at the core, Jewish Teen Foundations, which take teens through the process on the screen in front of you, are really about teaching Jewish values, developing Jewish leaders, and learning about the nonprofit world. The core of the Teen Foundation process is reflected in this program arc as you see in front of you. And while much of what we'll discuss in the next hour is about the money, teen foundations are so much more. So if you're interested in data about the impact of teen philanthropy programs on teens, you can find some impact reports from our local programs in the field, some of representatives of whom are on the line today, that have been published over the last few years on our website. And I'm happy to help direct anyone to that information. So we want to share a little bit about our methodology. This year we had all our programs participate in a quantitative phone-based survey. Unlike in the past when we emailed programs and asked them to fill out a form, we actually hired an intern this summer, the bulk of whose work was focused on this, to set up phone conversations with all the programs. And this led to much greater response rate. 71 out of the 85 teen foundations that operated during last program year, which is an 84 response rate, responded to the survey. So we're very pleased with those results, and we feel like we have a really good data set from that. And we're very thankful to our intern, Sarah, who many of you spoke to this summer, who didn't take no for an answer as she contacted all of you. So, of course, with any survey, there are a number of limitations that we want to mention. First of all, obviously, all this data is based on self-report from program leaders, and there is always limits to self-reported data. Additionally, we know that teen philanthropy is really a constantly changing field, as our teens turn over often from year to year, or if not every couple of years, and at times our program leaders change as well. So we should just be careful not to extrapolate too much and to view this information as a snapshot at this particular point in time. And again, just a reminder that this is the data from last school year, so 2013-2014. This year we also had the JTFN intern who worked on this project code the issue areas that each of the grants fell into. And so we this was actually a change in our methodology. In the past, we had asked program leaders to identify the issue area that the grant fell into, but we felt that we'd achieve a higher reliability if we had one person making those decisions. But, with anything that is based on someone's judgment, there can also be some limitations to that. There's always a possibility of human error. And then finally, team foundations just vary greatly. While most participated in the process that we saw 2 slides ago, there are many differences within the pieces of that process, such as in the RFP process or restrictions on the use of funds. So at times it can feel like comparing team foundations is like comparing apples to oranges. So I mentioned that also as a limitation, that we're comparing things that are in some ways very the same and in some ways different. And we'll see the way that that variety is reflected in the data as we move ahead. So now that we understand the limitations, let's get ahead to the results. So this chart shows us that what I always say, which is that team foundations exist anywhere that you might find Jewish teens or families. So this chart reflects the number of respondents in each of those categories of institutions this past year. Again, it's not completely representative of the participants, if we just had a list of programs, because synagogues and day schools tended to have a lower response rate for this survey than other types of programs, potentially because we were asking during the summer when many of them were not around. Again, one of the possible limitations. So, but we get a good picture that summer camps, Jewish federations, synagogues, and Jewish community foundations are, among the largest groups who run these programs. So I'm just going to ask everyone, if you run a program, just so we can get an idea of who's on the phone today, use the chat box to just type in what institution you're calling from, what institution your program's in if you run a Jewish Teen Philanthropy program, and I will speak them out. I don't want you to get too complacent sitting at your computer. Great. Thank you. I see the results coming in. Unfortunately, we can't all see the results, so that's why I'm going to share them out. So we have someone from a federation, someone from a Jewish education agency called the Partnership for Jewish Learning and Life, a Jewish foundation, the Jewish Foundation of San Diego, a community foundation, the Rose Youth Foundation, and the Shalom Education Center, which I'm not sure which category that falls into. So thank you. I know there are others of you there, but thanks to those who responded. A Jewish Family and Children's Service as well. So we see that like this group, which is varied, like this group of respondents, which is varied, we have a varied group on the phone as well. So we also took a look at where these programs were geographically. As you can see, the highest percentage, by far is in the Northeast, with the west of the country as the next largest. And I actually took a quick look at some data from 2012 that I was able to Google up about where Jews are most represented in these regions in the United States. I wasn't able to find something that included Canada, and I saw that the Northeast and West are, like our programs, also most highly populated by Jews in this country. So it kind of stands to reason that where there are the most Jewish teens, there will be the most programs. The next few slides represent some data that we did not ask about in past surveys. So it's the first time that we've learned how old are the teens that are doing these programs. We didn't gather that before from the national field. So we see here that 10th and 11th grades are the most popular groups of teens to be involved in these programs, and that together 46% of Teen Foundation's participants are in 10th and 11th grade. So it's interesting as you think to yourself about the teens you're working with now or the teens you hope to work with, what percentage, where you fall within how likely it is other teens in the country of that age are doing this type of program. And here we see that the number of hours, of program hours that teens spend engaged in the teen philanthropy program. And you can see on the top that we refer to hours by cohort. So I just want to take a minute and explain that when we refer to cohort, we mean a group of roughly 20 teens participating in a group grant-making process together. What we know is that some teen foundations actually have multiple groups of teens, multiple cohorts participating in this kind of program. So in order to get the best understanding of what one teen's experience is in this program, we like to look at the differences between cohorts. So here we can see that the most common number of hours to participate in this kind of program is 11 to 20. But we also see here kind of what I mentioned before is that there is a huge variety. So there are teens that go through this type of grant-making process that participate less than 10 hours and more than 50 throughout the course of a semester or a school year. So again, you can kind of think to yourself, where does your program fall within this? And I'd love to, again, just get a feeling for who's on the phone. If you could just chat in, what do you say the number of hours your teens participate in this group grant-making process is in your program? So just type into the chat box how many hours. They're coming in. We have 30, 11 to 20, 60, including a retreat. So we see how 60 would include something like a retreat weekend. Great. So if you want to share with us, others can share the number of hours. Maybe you have to calculate it up. In the meantime, we'll move on. So we're going to move on to talk a little bit about the grants. In some ways, the most impressive piece of data we can share is that teens awarded just under $1 million in 2013 to 2014 to nonprofits through 362 grants. And if we're going to take the time to focus on the money like we are here, that's really not an insignificant amount of money to be collectively awarded. And we definitely applaud the work of all those teen foundations giving out so many important grants to nonprofits. Here we see that most groups of teens, again cohorts, doing this work, the groups of teens doing this work awarded between $500,000 and $61,000. Again, big range of the amount of money. And that individual grants ranged from $50 to $20,000. So we know that some in a cohort where they have 61,000, their grants are probably going to be much larger than the cohort where they have $500. And again, all of these are counted in our field. And interestingly, 50% of cohorts gave between $500 and $4,000. So that seems to be a sweet spot for many teen foundations. And it shows that most of the programs are giving on somewhat of a more modest scale, while there are some programs that really have larger sums of money. So just looking at this, I'm wondering if anyone wants to share any reflections, about these large ranges, or, did you know there were programs that gave modest funds? Maybe you want to hear from someone, or more significant funds, how they do that. So I'm just opening the floor for a minute. Please use *6 to unmute yourself. And I do see a question there. I'm sorry, that's *7 to unmute yourself. So, William, I see a question. Do you want to ask it out loud? All right. I'm not hearing you, so I will. The question was, there are was about the last data point, I think, and what that means. So 50% of cohorts gave grants that were individual grants that were between $500 and $4,000. I'm sorry. Yes, individual. No, excuse me. I want to restate that. That the total amount of 50% of cohorts, the total amount of money that they gave was between $500 and $4,000. That is the correct way to say that. So the total amount that group gave was between $500 and $4,000 in multiple grants of smaller size, as small as 50. Any other reflections or comments on this? Again, *7 to unmute. All right, we'll move on. Thanks for that question, Lou. So we have data about the amount of money given by teen foundations that responded to our survey since 2008. And we can see that on this chart that both the number of programs, which is reflected in the N on the bottom, and the amount of money given has increased each year that we've surveyed the field. This growth represents the growth in the field in general, that there are many more programs than they were. You can see there were 20 programs that we surveyed in 2008. And also that over the years we've improved our methodology, and so we've seen a much better response rate. So particularly from 2011 to 2012, and then we took a year off of this survey, and then to this past year, there was a 70% response rate the last time we did the survey in the 2011-2012 year versus an 84% response rate this year. So while the field has grown, we are also just getting more, we're capturing more of it in this data. This year, for the first time, we also asked teen foundations if they put any parameters on their teens' giving. And some of the, and we didn't have an expectation about what those parameters were. We asked, do you put any parameters, and what are they, as an open-ended question. And so we heard that 27 out of 71 respondents, or 38%, shared some type of parameter. The thing is that their answers to these questions varied greatly. Some talked about local organizations or Jewish organizations. A few mentioned the mission of the host organization as a parameter, or local giving as a parameter. So any one of these parameters did not seem very significant within the larger pool of money. And it was interesting to see, as you see in front of you, the most likely parameters. The majority of parameters did restrict some awards to go to local or Jewish organizations, but again, the numbers were just not that significant. And we'll see a little bit more of that as we move forward. So we're going to look more carefully at what some of that is. I'll say that there was a question about the significance question. We weren't able to, I can't report whether the numbers were statistically significant. The wonderful woman who did our data analysis wasn't able to figure that out exactly based on the pool that we had, the data that we had. But you can see here, for example, in this study, we'll go into it on this slide, we'll go into it for a minute. So 60% of the grants given by teen foundations went to local organizations, and 8% of that was restricted to go to local organizations by the parameters of the host institution or the teen philanthropy program. So again, 8% is a pretty small number. We'll leave it at that. And I'd love to hear, we see here that a lot of the money goes to local organizations. I'd love to unmute the line for a minute and just hear from folks, given that we know that it's not about the parameters set by the organization, why do you think teens like to give locally? So I'm going to unmute everyone to give you a chance to share with us.
The conference has been unmuted.
So if you run a program, do you find your teens drawn to local giving?
Hi, this is Josie from Memphis.
Hi.
Hey, hi. And our teens are definitely drawn to giving locally. They like knowing what's going on in their own backyard. They like, they see these programs in action, and they see that it has an impact on them and their friends and their families and their community. So, locally definitely resonates with them.
Great. So they feel like they can see the impact, and quite literally often they can see it on a site visit, or they know the work of the organization from the community.
Yes.
Very, very well put. Is there anyone else who'd like to share what you've seen in your programs?
Hey, Naomi, it's Celeste from the Jewish Community Foundation in Princeton. Just to piggyback what you were saying, I think it's just logistically easier to have site visits that are closer because it takes less time. Students can see multiple organizations if they're geographically closer versus, traveling an hour and a half or an hour to the city or to some other location that has different kind of organizations, different focuses.
Great. So as many of you know, many of our teens go on site visits to the organizations that they're considering funding. And so being able to see those firsthand, I always hear from teens and program leaders that is so impactful. And so that may have an impact on why they're giving locally.
Naomi, This is Marcia in Stamford, Connecticut, and Naomi knows I'm just getting started at this, but our teens in this current cohort are very serious about wanting to know that their money made an actual difference that they could kind of see, and so they wanted to be able to fund a program or a project or a something, and that's only possible locally. They can't really see that when we talk about national or international giving.
Yeah. Great.
Naomi, this is Darren in San Diego. I also want to just point out that when we integrate Jewish values and content into the program, one of the things we do here in San Diego, I know they do in San Francisco as well, is pull some texts about giving locally first. So I'm wondering if that maybe plays into some of their grant-making decisions as well.
So the Jewish values conversation that you may start with frames this as talking. There's great text we can share when we share Jewish values conversation with our teens about how giving locally is really important. That's really interesting. Thanks, Darren.
You're welcome.
Any last reflection on this, or something you'd like to share about the data we presented so far? All right. I really appreciate all the sharing. It's one thing to look at the numbers, but hearing your experiences really brings all this to life. So I'll take them and then unmute everyone again, and then we'll move on, but we'll have more opportunity for this kind of sharing.
The conference has been muted.
Oh, I want to share one other thing actually about this data point, which is that it is when we compared this with the last time we did the survey, which was 2011-2012, the results were shockingly similar. So I'm not presenting a slide to you about that because there's not much interesting to say about it, but we've seen some consistency in this high level of local giving over the years, and we heard from some of you what those reasons are. So here we also asked the question, what organizations did your grants go to in terms of Jewish organizations serving the Jewish community, Jewish organizations serving anyone, and non-sectarian organizations. And we can see here that 58% of the money, or just over $550,000, went to Jewish organizations. So that is, the two blue pieces of the pie. And 21% of that, or just under 2,000, were from teen foundations that placed a parameter around Jewish giving. So once again, I think that this, I'm curious to hear how your teams interact with this question about giving to Jewish organizations that serve Jews, to Jewish organizations that serve anyone, or to organizations that are not explicitly Jewish. I should have left you unmuted, so I'm going to unmute again.
The conference has been unmuted.
Great. So reflections on how your teams make their decisions about the Jewish conversation. Sorry, about Jewish organizations. I was reading your chat. Celeste, did you want to share with us?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I apologize for the whole muting. So the mission of our program is that all the organizations that receive grant are Jewish organizations. However, I always tell our participants that, a lot of the projects service a Jewish and non-Jewish community. For example, we devote our 10th grade year to Jewish arts and culture, and a lot of the different grants that are awarded benefit museums or Jewish cultural organizations. And, I always joke they don't card at the door. Like, you never know who is looking at an exhibit or a certain museum experience that can educate them about Jewish culture, Judaism, and the impact that it could have. Another example is for our 11th grade year, we focus on outreach and advocacy, and a project that's very popular with our teens is called something in Helicopter, where they fund an educational helicopter ride for the Israel Project. And they take reporters on a helicopter ride of Israel and educate them about the geography. And the impact that has is tremendous, because now these reporters have a better sense of Israel and the geography, and when then they report on Israel, it's more accurate. And the impact of that, reaches, it's endless, whether it's Jews, non-Jews, etc.
Great. Thanks for sharing some examples, Celeste. Can anyone else share on this topic about giving to organizations that are explicitly Jewish? They're going to be meeting in New York. I noticed that.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I do.
This is Loam in San Francisco, and just one interesting thing that I would bring up is that for my first few years or a couple years in this field, I found there a real confusion or discussion amongst the teams whether funding a Jewish organization was the same thing in their minds idealistically as funding the Jewish community. And so we now intentionally bring this conversation topic up at a certain point every year. Does it hold the same value as one or the other? What we try and tease out for them is that there are actually different values, and there's a benefit for supporting Jewish organizations that serve non-Jewish communities or non-sectarian. And there's also an important for serving Jewish organizations that specifically serve Jewish communities, but they're not the same thing. And we usually find that they have not made that distinction in their own mind when they start the program. So it's an interesting moral, ethical question for them to think about in their process before they're actually making giving decisions.
I think that's a really important point. And for those of you who run programs, I don't know how likely this is to come up, but it sounds like in San Francisco you're proactively making sure that you surface this, that the teams are thinking about these differences, and specifically the difference between Jewish organizations that serve only Jews and Jewish organizations that serve all. So I encourage others to kind of surface this in your programs if they don't come up. Yes, I'll send that to you right now. Loam, I saw you had a comment before. Do you want to share that now?
Sure. I had just a question from the previous slide, if we can skip back to it, because we were talking mostly about local, but I noticed that Israel giving was just 13%, and then international was another 13%. And I'm just interested, especially with in the Bay Area at least, Israel is a controversial topic in some families and in some areas and some communities. And so it's not a given that everybody is excited to give to Israel. I'm just wondering, in other groups that do give to Israel, do teens see Israel as a special case separate from international giving, or is it just another country? Or do people are excited to give to Israel or reluctant to give to Israel? I'm just interested in how those conversations go for the 13% of the grants that went there.
Great question. Can anyone share about your process of having the conversation about Israel or giving internationally?
I can say in Memphis we don't really give internationally. However, we just finished a granting process actually last night. And as a matter of fact, thank you very much, it's great. But one of the projects that really resonated with the teens the most, that they just, when we scored it on the rubric, it got high scores all the way across, was a partnership between the day school and Israel. And they just loved that connection between our local community and Israel. And that was the only project we got that had that connection, because we do like to keep the dollars that we grant local, but the whole idea that there was a connection to Israel in that project, they just were all over it.
That's an example of teens being really drawn to it. Who on the line does grant internationally or in Israel? I'm having fun looking at your names that a lot of the funding is local of who happens to be on the call.
Yeah. This is Shana Goldberg from the Partnership for Jewish Learning and Life in Whippany, New Jersey. Our program is a 2-year philanthropy foundation, and the second year completely focuses on, we direct the teens giving based on Federation-connected agencies and Federation beneficiaries, and the second year is completely focused on national and international giving. So the teens learn about the different partnerships that are created through the Federation, our sister cities in Israel and in Ukraine and elsewhere. And then we also bring in other international agencies for the second year of giving.
And is Israel included in international?
Yes. So a lot of the funds end up going to Israel-based projects, whether it's because of the relationship that we have with our with Federation or kind of different agencies like Jaffe or JDC asking for Israel-related programs. And so the teens in our program will participate in an Israel advocacy seminar. They'll meet with Israelis. They'll learn about what our connection is to Israel. It's a kind of an important part of the second year of the program.
But they're not required to give to Israel?
No, they have certain grants that are proposed to them by the agencies, and they're not required to give to Israel. But a lot of the times they end up giving a significant amount of money to people in Israel because they feel a stronger connection.
So that there are some examples of teens kind of feeling that connection to Israel.
Mhm.
Anyone else? Was there someone else who was about to say something before?
Yeah, this is Celeste. So our final year, 12th grade year, the teens focused solely about organizations in Israel. And in terms of their enthusiasm, we have not had any questions or complaints. They know going in that year is going to be focused on Israel. We do a lot of Israeli culture activities to sort of orient them about the cultural aspects of Israel, and a lot of the organizations that they learn about aren't really political. It might be like Thank Israeli Soldiers or Megan David Adam or One Family Fund, so organizations that, help Israelis in general. They could be a victim of terror, whether they're Jewish or not, or, the ambulance. There's another need-based organization that I think helps Jews and non-Jews. So we haven't experienced any reluctancy in terms of giving.
So it sounds like there's some care in selecting organizations that you would encourage to apply, and being sure that they're not political and not viewed that way. All right. Thanks for bringing up that discussion, Lil. Any last things to say about on this, Israel International Giving? All right. I flipped back for a minute to the conversation about Jewish organizations or non-sectarian. Also, any last comments on that? Okay. So we'll move on. It seems like there's no background noise. If anyone feels that they may create background noise, you can feel free to mute yourself, but we'll have some more opportunities for sharing, so I'll leave the line unmuted, but you can mute yourself pressing *6. All right. So this chart compares the amount of money going to Jewish versus non-sectarian organizations between the 2011-2012 and 2013-2014 surveys. And the reason I shared this comparison data is I think that it is interesting, and I'm not really sure what it means, so maybe some of you can think with me about it. That what we see here is that while just about the same amount of money went to Jewish organizations, if you take Jewish organizations of any type, over those two survey years, the most recent survey shows much more money, 40% as opposed to 26%, went to Jewish organizations serving Jews as opposed to Jewish organizations serving everyone. So, I'm not sure what may have shifted to present this, that represents this big difference in a lot more of the money going to Jewish organizations going to ones that serve Jews. Does anyone have any thoughts about that?
I can imagine there would be an assumption that maybe a lot of the news reporting about, the news reporting about anti-Semitism stuff came out this year and this summer after the 2013-14 year.
Because I had been thinking the same thing,
But I wouldn't think that because the big news started coming after that, and also I would be surprised but interested to see if these Jewish organizations serving Jews are in the areas where anti-Semitism is rising. I'm guessing more of them are local, and maybe some are in Israel. But if they're in Europe, that would be very illuminating.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have the list of all the organizations somewhere in my pile on my desk. I have looked at it and don't think that it stood out as being a lot of giving to Europe. I think it will be interesting, or other areas where Jews have experienced a lot of anti-Semitism recently. I think it will be interesting for us to see if that changes the next time we do this survey. Or perhaps the news will get better. So, I think that this is just interesting to absorb and to see where there are some shifts year over year, because in general we see a lot of consistency in what teams are interested in. So we'll see if this shift continues or changes. Okay, so the final thing I wanted to share with you before we have some more discussion is just to take a look at the most popular issue areas that teens gave to. And so in general, we find that teens are extremely attracted to giving to other young people. They like to fund programs for people their age. So 71 of the grants went to youth. 47 of them went to education. Again, all things that teens can really understand and have experienced themselves. 33 went to special needs, 29 to chronic illness, and 28 to issues of poverty. So, what I see here is both reflecting things they can understand, youth education, seeing others or themselves experiencing special needs within their education, are all things we know a lot of teens experience, and we have seen those be somewhat steady over the last few years we've done the survey, and poverty as well. And I think we hear from teens that they like addressing, very immediate need. It's something they feel like they can wrap their finger at. If I provide this many meals, or this many supplies to people that need them, I can really understand that. What's interesting to me here is chronic illness was added to this list of the top 5, and it's never been in the top 5 before over the years that we've done this survey. So that seems to have risen as a new thing of interest. So once again, the line is open. I'm curious to hear any thoughts that you have or questions that you have about these issue areas.
Hi, Naomi. It's Ben Finan from Denver and Rose Youth Foundation. One thing I'm seeing here is that my teens just finished their grant cycle, and we're targeting education and homelessness. But they were doing it with that youth lens. They were looking at high school dropout rates. They were looking at what happens to homeless teens specifically. So although the other 4 are not immediately youth, I think there is some tie back on that.
Yeah, I think that when we did the coding, we tried to identify what seems like the most significant part of the mission of the organization, but you're right that there's a lot of overlap in these.
Naomi, one thing that I'd like to point out is here in San Diego, a lot of the teens, both involved in my program and other programs, have also been involved with Friendship Circle or other special needs programs through service opportunities. So that really plays out for them in this program because it's something that they're very familiar with.
Yeah, and these tend to be areas that they may be able to, it's easier to be involved with a service opportunity with children with special needs or with chronic illness than, for example, victims of terror, which is another possible code in our list. So that's something they can really understand because they've seen it and experienced it.
Can you repeat which of these categories was first time in the top 5?
Sure. The only one that is new to the list of top 5 is chronic illness.
And that focus like on leukemia and cancers and things like that, or?
I would have to look at those actual 29 grants to tell you specifically.
Okay.
So if anyone, email me if you're interested in the list of all the grantees. We're happy to share that list. I'll have to just get it into a better, nicer format for those who are interested.
I think that would be actually really helpful, especially as we're looking for maybe organizations to recommend to our teens as they're doing research, especially in Israel, especially in the Jewish organizations serving Jews, like these categories that might be a little harder to find really quality grants that work well with teen understanding. If there's a listing specifically by those categories, I'd be very interested.
Yeah, for sure. It's good. I'm happy to share that, and it's good to know what organizations are familiar with teen foundations already. Although different process and maybe different, at least they're familiar with this concept. Great. All right. So I just want to take a minute to have some time for more reflection. I think we talked about a bunch of the specific results that have more to say about them, let's say. But I'm curious to hear first if anything else resonates with you that you didn't get to mention already or surprises you. And this could be for those, there are a couple folks on the call who do not run teen foundations, just a few. So we're happy to hear from you what surprises you about our field or interests you. Gives us some information about our perception or how we can talk about ourselves. All right, nothing too surprising. I got it. So then let's just talk a little bit about how all this information might inform your work. Could you imagine using anything that you saw or heard here in the work that you're doing? I think Loam actually got us started with that in thinking about how knowing organizations that have already given to teen foundations could be helpful in figuring out who to reach out to as potential grantees. It's a good opportunity for sharing. How else might you use this?
This is Darren again. One thing that this makes it very helpful when talking to champions of the local programs, just showing them the impact that this makes on a national level and tying it back to the work that we do at the local level.
Great. So, I'm going to send out these slides after the call, and we'll post them on our website as well. And we're very happy to have you share pieces of this information, any of it that you think is relevant with folks that are funding your local programs or that you might want to encourage to fund your local programs. There's a lot of power in thinking about how this is not just a little project in your community, but you're part of a bigger national field. We hope that you'll use it in that way.
Two things that I would be interested in knowing more about as well is for the percentages in terms of geography and topic and such. It seems like you broke down the information in terms of number of grants, but I would also be interested in seeing those numbers broken down by number of dollars in terms of how much money went to Israel versus international versus local versus national, how many dollars went to chronic illness versus special needs, because I know that when we do that own analysis of our own grants, some surprising shifts happen. Even though the number of grants might say one message, the number of dollars and how those get allocated send another message too. And the other thing that I think I've mentioned before that I would be really interested in, and I know it's a bigger project, would be some kind of survey of non-Jewish youth philanthropy programs so we can really see a comparison of how Jewish philanthropy is important because it gives differently than non-sectarian philanthropy. And that could be a really interesting thing to share with teens to instill this kind of sense of responsibility of if they see what youth philanthropy is doing, but it is only, if Jewish youth philanthropy is giving 13% of their grants to Israel, but general youth philanthropy is giving 1% or nothing, will that instill a sense of like it's us or nobody? Same thing with Jewish communities receiving grants. Like it was something like 40% of, I think it showed the grants or Jewish organizations giving to serving Jewish communities. And if we looked at the same stat for general youth philanthropy and watched the number drop, it could be an interesting message for youth to see that the responsibility lies with them and because no one else is doing it or they're doing it on a much smaller scale than them.
Yeah, that would be really interesting to see. Maybe there's a new-ish project, or perhaps it's its own organization called Youth Philanthropy Connect that is bringing together folks in the broader field of youth philanthropy, including Jewish youth philanthropy, but many others. And if you think our field has a lot of variety, there's a lot of variety if you look broadly in youth philanthropy. But perhaps they'll put this on their agenda to survey the larger fields.
Are they publishing their results, or are they?
No, they're not. I said perhaps. They don't have any results. I said perhaps. No, they are at the moment really just collecting information about who's even doing what they would consider youth philanthropy, which includes all of you and all of the programs that we're talking about today, but is also much, much, much broader.
Okay.
Naomi, it's Aviva here from Natan Amplifier. I just was thinking kind of building off of that. What I'm really excited about is some of the research that we're going to be doing on the larger Jewish Giving Circle field beyond teens, and then using that to kind of compare and think about this as a pipeline and really also, emphasize to teens that they're a part of this larger movement. And I'm really excited to have such amazing data to work from as a baseline and then to learn more about everyone who's giving in this way no matter how old they are.
Yeah, I know that you're interested in perhaps doing a survey of the broader Giving Circle movement, of which Jewish Teen Philanthropy is a part. So I wonder if we'd see differences among how adults give and how teens give.
Exactly. And of course, we would definitely share whatever results we have with everyone on this call and the whole Jewish Teen Funders Network.
Thank you.
This is Darren again. I'd also like to say that I think Amplifier is a great platform for us as Teen Foundation programs to share who our grantees are.
Thanks, Darren.
No, I'm a big fan.
Yeah, there's a really cool feature we just added where you can report to the system what grants you've made, and then it'll show up automatically both on your circle profile and on the organization profile. I'm really excited about it. Happy to talk more about it offline to anyone on the call.
Yeah, I'm happy to connect anyone to Aviva. Great. And I was just thinking, has anyone shared this kind of information with your teens? The existing data that we've collected, or have any interest in that? Do you think that would be interesting, useful? How could you see using it?
I know here in Denver at the Rose Youth Foundation we're planning to share this with the teens and their parents at our final celebration here shortly, just to give them an idea of what else is going on in the country as they're getting ready to go away to college especially.
Great. I think that potentially meets two aims. I know that the Rose Youth Foundation, this may not be so much of your aim, but for those who are looking potentially for parents as donors to this program, you can, by sharing this with parents, they might envision their program as your program as part of a bigger field, and that might be attractive to them, as well as to teens. I think something else to meet that aim that we've seen growing is programs in many universities. And so there are all these teens who are, 1,800 teens represented in this survey who are then going off to many, many colleges. So your teens will meet other teens who did this work, other places, and they can start a Giving Circle or join one of their universities' courses on philanthropy. So there's just so much opportunity. So before I extend some thank yous, I just want to give the opportunity for any last comments.
Hey Naomi, it's Celeste. I had a few other things that this conversation sparked. One, I'm also curious to see the percentage of grants that don't get funded. Like, do most youth philanthropy programs fund all of the grants, most of the grants, or do teens pick like one or two that they resonate with them the most and give them more money? So is it more, giving one coin to many, or saving your coins and giving them to one?
That's a great question I haven't thought of asking.
And also, logistically, if let's say you had a $4,000 pot, how much do you ask the grantees for in their proposals that they can ask for? Can they ask for the whole pot, half the pot, quarter of the pot? Just curious logistically how that works in other programs.
I'd love to give a minute or two that we have left for anyone to share from their programs on that. So Celeste was asking, how, if you, let's say you had $10,000, what grant range do you ask for in your proposals? Do you ask folks for $5,000 to $10,000 proposals, for $25,000 to $5,000? How do different programs handle that?
This is Darren in San Diego. We anticipated that our grant-making pool was going to be $20,000, so we discussed, how many grants we'd be looking to make if it was that amount, and we decided that a $5,000 max would be what we would want to grant out. So that's what we sent in our RFPs, asking for proposals for $5,000.
Great. It sounds like your teens were involved in that process of making the decision of how they would want to split the money.
Yes.
And do most of the organizations get funded?
No, we asked 30 to apply, 22 actually applied, and 7 were funded.
Wow.
And only 2 were funded at the $5,000 level. The rest were less.
And the organizations that don't get funded, do they come back or no?
I mean, no.
He's not sure. It's his first year.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So would one other person care to share about how large of what's the monetary limit on your proposal versus how much money you have in your overall pool? All right. Well, if anyone.
Well, I'll just say that we don't know what our pool is when we send out the RFPs because it's all based on the team's own fundraising. But we set a minimum and a maximum amount for the grants, saying they're between $5,000 and $10,000, and the grantees can apply for any range within there. The vast majority pick $10,000, but not all. And I don't blame them at all. I'm always a little confused why they wouldn't apply for the full amount. Because we still allow the teams to make a decision between $5,000 and $10,000 too. That if they don't have enough to give everybody $10,000, or they want to give a little bit more to more choices, they can split up a $10,000 grant to 2 $5,000 grants, even though someone applied for $10,000. And so the question related before is grant applicants that we do not select, they do apply again in the future when we solicit them. So there's no hard feelings.
And Lom, how many organizations usually apply?
Similar to Darren, we usually send out about 25 RFPs per group, and we'll usually get back about 20 of them, and we make between 5 to 7 grants per group. So out of those 20 that apply per group, only about 5 to 7 will actually get a grant.
So I hope that this sounds like a really interesting conversation to hear how lots of programs handle this. So I'm going to think about opportunities for some of us to connect to talk more about this, and I encourage you to connect with each other. I'm always happy to share another program leader's email address if it's not in our directory, and check with them so that you can continue this conversation. Before we're totally out of time, I just want to take a minute. I know that the list is small, but we also have it online of all of the team foundations that participated in this survey. Again, many of you are on the line, so thank you for taking the time to talk with Sarah this summer. I just want to acknowledge all of you. We would not be able to do this without you. I also want to extend a thank you to Sarah Eagle, who was our intern, who was tenacious in collecting this data this summer, as well as our wonderful consultant, Alana Harwitz, who did data analysis for us, and Kara Shee, who designed the 4-page report that we sent out last month. And then finally to Daphna, our communications associate, who created this lovely PowerPoint and is really stepping up our PowerPoint abilities here at JTFN. So thank you to everyone. I really appreciate the conversation that we had. It's interesting for me to learn what you make of all these results, and I always enjoy hearing people's stories and having the opportunity to facilitate you sharing with one another. So really, thank you so much for your contributions. If you have any more questions about this data, feel free to email me. And look out for the next Lunch and Learn announcement. We will be focusing on our camp trainings next month as we continue to bring Team Foundations to summer camp. So if you're connected with a camp, I'm happy to talk with you about how you could do that. Again, many thanks to everyone, and you can join me in saying a thank you together right after I stop the recording.